I thought I knew everything about my grandmother. Then we found 7 passports and a loaded gun hidden in her sewing box, and my entire family history became a lie. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and 3 weeks ago, I watched them lower my grandmother Rose into the ground on a gray October morning in Columbus, Ohio. The woman who baked me chocolate chip cookies every Sunday, the woman who taught me to knit, the woman who never missed a single one of my soccer games. She was 87 years old, and I thought I'd have more time. But here's the thing about death. It doesn't just take a person, it reveals them. Before I tell you what we discovered in the days after her funeral, if you're finding this story intriguing, I'd really appreciate it if you'd hit that subscribe button. What unfolded over the next 2 weeks shattered everything I thought I knew about family, identity, and the quiet heroes living among us. And if you think this is a story worth sharing, please send it to a friend who appreciates a good mystery, because what I'm about to tell you is absolutely true. Now, let me take you back to the day everything changed. Grandma Rose had lived in the same two-bedroom house in German Village for 43 years. Yellow siding, white shutters, a garden out back where she grew the best tomatoes in the neighborhood. After Grandpa died in 2009, everyone told her to move into assisted living. She refused. "This house has my memories," she'd say, her hands deep in the soil. "You don't abandon memories." The day after the funeral, my mom Diane, my Aunt Linda, and I started the heartbreaking task of sorting through her belongings. My Uncle Brian was supposed to help, but he texted that he was too busy with work. Typical Brian, never around when you actually needed him. Every drawer we opened felt like saying goodbye all over again. Her reading glasses on the nightstand, the half-finished crossword puzzle, the lavender sachets she made every spring tucked into every drawer. My mom kept breaking down, and my dad, Tom, would hold her while she cried into his shoulder. "I'm not ready for this. I'm not ready," she kept saying. Aunt Linda was trying to be practical, but I could see her hands shaking as she folded Grandma's cardigans, bringing each one to her nose to catch the scent one last time. "We have to do this, Diane. The estate lawyer needs an inventory by Friday." I volunteered to clean out the spare bedroom where Grandma did her sewing. Honestly, I needed to be alone. The grief was suffocating me, and I couldn't let them see me fall apart. That room smelled like fabric and her flowery perfume, the one that came in the pink bottle. Her ancient Singer sewing machine sat by the window, catching the afternoon light. And next to it was her sewing box, this beautiful wooden chest with brass hinges that she'd had for as long as I could remember. I'd watched her open it hundreds of times, pulling out buttons and thread and all those little sewing things. I lifted the lid, expecting nothing unusual. The top tray looked completely normal. Spools of thread in every color, pin cushions, measuring tape, packets of needles. But when I lifted that tray out, my heart stopped. Underneath, wrapped in a faded yellow cloth, was a gun. I'm talking about a real gun. Black, heavy-looking, and very much not something my cookie-baking, church-going grandmother should own. My hands started shaking. This didn't make sense. This didn't make any sense at all. "Mom!" My voice came out strangled, barely above a whisper. Then louder, "Mom, you need to see this." I heard her footsteps rushing up the stairs, that panicked mother run that I remembered from childhood when I'd get hurt. She appeared in the doorway, her eyes red from crying. "Sarah, what's wrong? What happened?" I just pointed at the sewing box. I couldn't form words. Her face went completely white. "Is that a gun?" "Yeah." Aunt Linda appeared behind her, and when she saw it, she actually gasped. "Oh my God, is that loaded?" I hadn't even thought to check. The idea that my grandmother owned a loaded weapon was incomprehensible. But here's where the story gets truly insane. Beneath the gun, there were 7 passports. 7. All of them had my grandmother's photo, but each one had a different name. I picked up the first one with trembling hands. Rose Mitchell. That was her real name, or at least the name I'd always known. But then I opened the second one. Rose Kowalski. The photo was definitely her, maybe in her 40s, but the name was completely different. I grabbed the others, spreading them across the floor like I was dealing cards. Rose Delacroix, Rose Bergman, Rose Chen, Rose Tavaroni, Rose Volkov. Different names, different birthplaces. One said she was born in Poland, another said France, Germany, China. The dates didn't even match her real birthday. My mind was racing. What the hell was Grandma involved in? Mom snatched the passports from the floor, flipping through them frantically, her fingers fumbling. This can't be real. This is some kind of mistake. Maybe they're props from a play? She was in that community theater group in the 70s. Mom, Aunt Linda grabbed one from her hands, studying it closely. These have official stamps. Look at this one. Entry stamps from Germany, 1982. This one has stamps from Czechoslovakia. These are real. The room started spinning. I sat down hard on the floor, surrounded by these impossible objects. My sweet, gentle grandmother, the woman who cried during Hallmark movies, the woman who donated every week to the church bake sale, the woman who'd read me bedtime stories and made me hot chocolate when I was sad. Who was she? Who was Rose Mitchell really? That's when we heard the front door slam downstairs. "Hello, anyone here?" My Uncle Brian's voice echoed up the stairs, that entitled tone he always had, like the world was inconveniencing him just by existing. He appeared in the doorway, checking his Rolex. "What's all the drama? I've got a conference call in 30 minutes, so let's make this quick." My mom stood up, still clutching the passports, her whole body shaking. "Brian, we found these in Mom's sewing box, along with a gun." He barely glanced at them, just waved his hand dismissively. So maybe they're fake IDs from when she was young. People did weird stuff in the 60s, probably thought it was cool or something. "These have stamps from the 80s and 90s, Aunt Linda said, her voice sharp with anger. "And explain the gun, Brian." He shrugged, that infuriating gesture where he'd raise one shoulder like nothing in the world really mattered. "Look, I don't have time for this Nancy Drew routine. Just throw it all out. What matters is the estate. This house is worth at least $500,000 in this market. We need to list it by next month, get the property inspection done, and—" I felt something snap inside me. "Your mother just died 4 days ago, and you're worried about real estate?" He looked at me like I was a child who didn't understand how the adult world worked. "Grow up, Sarah. Sentiment doesn't pay bills. Look, whatever Mom was hiding, it died with her. Ancient history, water under the bridge. Let's focus on what's real and divvy up the assets. I'm thinking we split everything 3 ways, sell the house, liquidate her accounts." My mom's face crumpled, and when she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "How can you be so cold? This is our mother, your mother." "I'm being practical, Diane. One of us has to be." He checked his watch again, making a show of it. "Look, call me when you're ready to have an adult conversation about the will. I've got to run." And he left, just like that. Walked out while we stood there surrounded by evidence that our mother had lived an entire secret life. Aunt Linda's jaw clenched so hard I could hear her teeth grinding. "That selfish son of a—" "Linda," Mom warned, but there was no strength in her voice. We sat in stunned silence, the passports spread around us like puzzle pieces we couldn't fit together. About 10 minutes later, the doorbell rang. I went downstairs, still in a daze, and opened the door. Standing on the porch was an elderly man I'd never seen before. He looked about 75, with kind blue eyes, a weathered face, and a flat cap. He held a plate covered in aluminum foil. "Hello," he said, and I immediately caught his accent, Eastern European maybe. "I am looking for the family of Rose Mitchell. My name is Gregor Novak. I lived 3 houses down, the brick house with the blue door. I brought kolaches, traditional Czech pastries. Rose loved them." There was something about him, something gentle and sad and genuine. I invited him in. He set the pastries on the kitchen table and looked around the house slowly, like he was saying goodbye to it. "Rose was a good neighbor, a very good friend to me and my wife, God rest her soul. I am so sorry for your loss. The world is less bright without her." My mom came down the stairs, wiping her eyes. "Thank you, Mr. Novak. That's very kind of you." He nodded, removing his cap, then hesitated. I saw him take a breath, like he was making a decision. May I ask you something? When you were sorting through her things, did you find anything unusual? Perhaps in a wooden box, a sewing box? The three of us froze. The air in the room changed. Why would you ask that? Aunt Linda said, carefully, her eyes narrowing. Gregor sighed deeply and pulled out a chair, sitting down slowly like his bones hurt. Because Rose asked me to watch for this moment. 6 months ago, when she knew her health was failing, she came to my house. She said, Gregor, if something happens to me and my family finds the box, please help them understand. Tell them who I was. I promised her I would. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. What understand? Who was she? He looked at each of us in turn, his blue eyes full of sorrow and something else. Pride, maybe? Your grandmother was not who you thought she was, but she was a hero, a true hero, and it is time you knew the truth. Gregor told us everything, and I'm still processing it 3 weeks later. My grandmother wasn't just Rose Mitchell from Ohio. She was born Rose Volkov in Kiev, Ukraine in 1937. When she was just 4 years old, the Nazis invaded. Her entire family was killed. Her parents, her two brothers, her grandparents, everyone. She survived by hiding. Different families took her in, risking their lives, and she learned to use different names, different identities to stay alive. A little girl constantly becoming someone new just to see another day. After the war ended, she was 12 years old and completely alone in the world. That's when she was recruited by a network, an underground organization that helped Jewish refugees escape from behind the Iron Curtain during the Cold War. Gregor leaned forward, his voice intense. She was a courier. She smuggled people across borders, documents, money, sometimes children who needed to escape. She spoke 7 languages. She could cross a border with one identity and come back with another. She saved hundreds of lives. Hundreds. Suddenly, the passports made sense. The different names, the different birthplaces. Each one was a tool, a disguise, a way to move through a world that wanted to stop her. And the gun? I asked, my voice barely working. Protection. The people she fought against, they were dangerous. Secret police, border guards, informants. In 1984, she was nearly killed in Prague. Someone betrayed her network, and she barely escaped. After that, she never traveled without protection again. My mom was crying, but differently now. Not the helpless grief from before. This was something else. Why didn't she tell us? All these years, why didn't she say anything? Gregor's expression softened. Because the people she helped, some of them are still alive. They have families, grandchildren of their own now. And the people she fought against, some of them are still alive too. She kept the secret to keep all of you safe, to give you normal lives, to let you grow up without fear. He pulled out an old photograph from his wallet, worn at the edges. It showed a young woman, maybe 30, with dark hair and fierce eyes, standing behind the Berlin Wall. She looked nothing like the soft grandmother I knew, and yet everything like her. She came to America in 1973, Gregor continued. She met your grandfather at a community event for immigrants. She fell in love. She chose to become Rose Mitchell, to have a family, to plant a garden, and bake cookies and live quietly. But she never forgot who she was, what she did, the lives she saved. Aunt Linda picked up one of the passports, running her finger over the photo. Her voice cracked. So Mom was a spy? No. Gregor's voice was firm, almost sharp. Not a spy, a savior. She was one of the bravest people I have ever known. My own sister was one of the people she helped escape from Poland in 1979. That is how I knew her. My sister is alive today with 3 children and 5 grandchildren because of Rose. The next day, we called a family meeting. My mom insisted that Brian come, and for once, he actually showed up on time, probably thinking we were finally ready to talk about selling the house and splitting the money. We laid everything on the table: the 7 passports, the gun, which we discovered was indeed loaded, Gregor's testimony, and we'd also found a safety deposit box key in Grandma's jewelry box. That morning, before Brian arrived, we'd gone to the bank. Inside that safety deposit box were medals from 3 different countries, letters, dozens of them from people she'd saved, photographs of her younger self with other operatives, standing in front of places I recognized from history books: Budapest, Prague, Berlin. There were also journals written in multiple languages, documenting her missions in careful detail. Brian walked in, set down his briefcase, and started to say something about market valuations. My mom held up her hand. "Sit down, Brian, and be quiet for once in your life." Something in her voice made him stop. He sat. We told him everything. We showed him the evidence, piece by piece: the passports, the medals, the letters from people whose lives she'd saved. We read him parts of her journals, translated by Gregor. I watched my uncle's face go through about 10 different emotions: disbelief, confusion, shock, and then finally something I'd never seen before: shame. "So," my mom said, her voice quiet but powerful, "before you rush to sell Mom's house and erase her memory for a profit, before you reduce her entire life to a real estate transaction, maybe you should know who she actually was." She stood up, holding one of the journals. While we were worried about soccer practice and parent-teacher conferences, she carried the weight of hundreds of lives. She had nightmares she never told us about, scars she never explained, and she did it all to give us this safe, normal, boring life that we all took completely for granted. My uncle's hands were shaking. For the first time in maybe 20 years, I saw actual emotion on his face, real emotion, not the calculated corporate mask he always wore. "I didn't know," he whispered. "I had no idea." "No," Aunt Linda said, and her voice was hard as steel. "You didn't know because you never bothered to ask. You never spent time with her. You were always too busy, always had somewhere more important to be. She died, Brian, and you couldn't even take one day off work to help your sisters sort through her things." He broke. Right there at that kitchen table, my uncle put his head in his hands and sobbed like a child. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I wasted it. All that time, I wasted all of it." We didn't sell Grandma's house. We decided on something better. With Gregor's help, we connected with the Holocaust Museum in Washington and several refugee organizations. They were amazed by what we'd found. Apparently, people like my grandmother, these underground operatives who saved lives during the Cold War, most of them stayed silent forever. Their stories died with them. But not Grandma Rose's story. Not anymore. Her story is now part of a permanent exhibition honoring the unsung heroes of the Cold War rescue networks. Her house became a small museum and meeting space for refugees and their families, a place where new Americans can find community and help. Brian changed. I know that sounds impossible, but he did. Not overnight, not easily, but gradually he started showing up. He volunteers at the center now, 3 days a week. He helps refugee families navigate paperwork, find jobs, settle into new lives. Turns out, knowing your mother was braver than you'll ever be is pretty humbling. As for me, I wear one of Grandma's old necklaces now. Just a simple silver pendant with a tiny compass on it. Gregor said she wore it during her operations for luck and guidance. I teach her story to groups who visit the museum. I tell them about Rose Volkoff, the little girl who survived the impossible, about Rose de la Cruz and Rose Bergman and all the others, the women she became to save lives, and about Rose Mitchell, who chose love and tomato plants and chocolate chip cookies after years of living in the shadows. I thought I knew my grandmother. I was wrong, but I learned something that changed my entire life. The people we love are deeper than we ever imagine. They carry stories we can't see, fight battles we don't know about, and make sacrifices that shape our entire world without us ever knowing. Grandma Rose taught me to knit, but she taught me something else too. She taught me that ordinary people can do extraordinary things, that courage doesn't always wear a uniform, that the greatest heroes are often hiding in plain sight, baking cookies and tending their gardens. I miss her every single day. But now, when I think of her, I don't just see the grandmother who braided my hair and taught me to make pie crust. I see all of her: the survivor, the hero, the woman who chose love was the bravest thing of all. If this story touched you, please share it. And maybe take the time to ask your own grandparents about their lives. Sit down with your elderly neighbors. Listen to their stories before it's too late. Because everyone has a story. You just have to be brave enough to listen. Thank you for hearing mine.